Hi everyone, welcome to my first tutorial, and in this tutorial I'm going to be covering the beautiful ring pour art that I did on my Instagram account. And to start out, we're going to just jump right into it. To start out, we have a cup, and I've torn a piece of cardboard to create a divider inside of the cup. It's not perfect, and you're going to see some paint flowing around through there. That's okay. It all creates to the beauty that was the finished product. So I started out with some white. I took 1 part paint, 2 parts pouring medium. And to find out which supplies I'm using, I'm going to go ahead and list those in the description. I think I used the Deco Art pouring medium here. I did. I used the Deco Art pouring medium, 1 part paint, 2 parts pouring medium. And I did that with all of my colors. I'm using a dark purple, a magenta color, and I'm layering those colors into the cup. And I did notice that when I poured one side, obviously it's going to leak out into the other side. So it's very important to pour both sides at the same time. If you have a piece of cardboard that you torn out and it doesn't exactly fit the cup, you're going to have some overflow into the other side if you try to do it one side at a time. Now I'm adding some black here. And because I didn't add too much black, I was able to go ahead and add a little bit on one side, a little bit in the other side. And that just adds dimension to the rings that you're pouring out. It'll give you some depth and separation from the other colors. I'm adding in the rest of my colors here. Notice I'm pouring it in at the same time. And once I have those colors added and I feel like I have enough paint, I'm checking to make sure that everything looks good. I'm going to take out that center divider very carefully and quickly. Just pull it straight up, straight out. And now you're going to have a nice little separation of color there that adds a two-dimensional two-tone feel to your ring pour. Now to start out, I'm pouring very slowly and I'm doing very large circles. I want to get all that color on the outside. When my white starts coming through, I'm going to start focusing it more on the inside. Now I'm doing very, very, very small circles, very careful. I'm a perfectionist. I want this circle to look perfect. So I'm making sure that all of that white paint is just centered very, very carefully right in the middle, creating very small rings. And you can see how tedious I am taking this. I am making sure that every drop of paint is out and every drop of paint is perfectly centered. Now I have that. Make sure it's very careful at this point. Make sure you don't get any drops coming from your cup outside on your outer rings. Done that before? It's very sad. I'm taking my blowtorch now and I'm popping all the air bubbles that are in my paint and making sure that nothing is in there that's going to just completely explode on me later. Now I'm picking the canvas up and I'm doing this very, very carefully. I don't want to destroy the structure of my rings that I've so meticulously poured. So I'm making sure for every angle that I go, I'm always coming back to center and I'm going very, very slowly. In my Instagram videos, it's sped up. It looks like I'm just sloshing the paint all over the place, but in actuality, I am going very, very slow. And I'm making sure that anytime I stretch those rings out, I'm pulling it back to center before I start moving in a different direction. Now, one thing I did notice as I was doing this, but I didn't employ this technique, is that when you go one direction, it seems like it would be beneficial to center and then go the exact opposite direction. So that way you don't get, you see how it's kind of curving a little bit? How I went to the top right and then I went center and then I went bottom right. I think if I would have went top right, center, bottom left, I think I would have avoided the oblong shape to it. But I'm still very happy with the way that it turned out. I wanted a little bit more white in it than I actually got, but the rings, when you look at them up close, are just gorgeous. They have so much definition, and that's due in part to the black that I put on the in the middle, in between all of the beautiful colors that I have here. Now, if I would have done this differently, if I could have watched myself do this and then do it all over again, I would have probably put in a little bit more black on the top, the very topmost layer, so that I could get that black, deep, dark color on the outside to kind of create more of that visual depth. But as you can see, I'm moving the paint around. I'm not worried about hitting, you know, all my corners, all my edges right now. What I'm trying to do is just move that paint around and get it as covered as possible without having it drip off the canvas. And what I'm going to do is, once I get the majority of the canvas covered, then I'll go back and take care of my edges, take care of, you know, all the white space on the outside portions of the canvas. I just want to make sure that I'm maintaining those rings. Those rings are gorgeous, and I don't want all the paint sliding off of the side of the canvas before I have time to make sure all those rings are doing their beautiful, beautiful work across the entire canvas. Now, what I'm going to do here is you'll actually start seeing me start covering some of the edges. I'm going to start letting some of that paint fall off because the majority of my canvas is covered. So now all I have to worry about is those edges. And you'll see, once I get the paint pushed off the side, you'll start to see that my ring pour still retains its shape, the shape that I want it to, because I'm not having a ton of paint fall off the canvas. Continuing to go ahead and let that cover each and every side. At this point, I am totally freaking out because it is gorgeous. I can't believe how beautiful it is, and I am super, super paranoid to mess it up at this point. Taking my finger and I'm just helping that paint along in some spots. I didn't use a lot of paint. I actually used the perfect amount of paint. I didn't have a lot of fallout on the sides. I didn't have a lot of extra paint on the canvas, and my design stayed exactly how I wanted it to because I used a very, very accurate amount of paint. Now, how I do this, I don't know. I don't have a very specific formula for how much paint I use per canvas. I just kind of eyeball it and see, okay, I have this size canvas. What does it look like I need to cover it? And sometimes I hit it, sometimes I don't. Maybe I'll refine that formula in, you know, later pieces that I do, but I've kind of found that even if I do have extra, I can always pour another. So I don't really stress too much over how much paint that I'm going to have on my canvas or left over. So now I am trying to get the last edges here covered, and it was a little tricky at the bottom because I did use a very accurate amount of paint. So I had to go in there very carefully and help that paint move along. But once I broke that edge that was kind of holding everything up, it moved perfectly, and the design stayed beautifully. I didn't have a lot of shifting of the pattern that I made, and at this point I was just beaming with happiness. I was so overjoyed at how beautiful this turned out, and I couldn't have been happier. Here I'm just making sure that all of my sides are covered. All of my sides have paint, my corners have paint, and I actually think I might have missed one small little area, but I'm not fussing too much about it. So turned it around, checking, making sure, and set it down very carefully. Make sure when you set your paint down and you leave it to dry that your surface is even. Otherwise you will come back the next morning and your beautiful design will be shifted. I've had situations where my design just completely fell off, and because I had 2 extra cups that I didn't realize stacked on top of each other. So be really careful. Here I'm taking the blowtorch and just kind of giving one last pass over to make sure there's no air bubbles. That's it. Thank you for watching this tutorial. All products I used will be listed below.